Hello friends and welcome to this guitar tone tutorial. I guess this is for the Fit for a King Reaper cover that I did. And we are looking at the multi-tracks right here, so I just want to get it out of the way at the start of the video. If you want access to these multi-tracks and more in-depth mixing tutorials and all the other tones that I do for all my covers, it is available in the description below. If you just click that link and follow that. All right. So yes, we are looking at the multi-tracks here today, figuring out how I got the tone for this cover. So let's just listen to that. Cool. So if you follow the links down below to my Patreon, you can get the amp and the cabs that I used for this, and you can get a good start from there. So let's just listen to how this came straight out of the amp, and then we'll talk about how I mixed it for this song. So here it is just straight out of the amp preset. And then mixed. Now let's just hear that in the mix real quick. Effects on and off. So you can tell that's a pretty big difference, but the point of our preset is to get a solid bass, right? So it might not sound perfect coming out of the amp, so we just have to mix it a little bit, but that bass sound is there. So let's talk about how we get to that finished sound. So here's our effects chain today, starting off with the Kornef Amplified Instrument Processor. So this is a great place to start off. I want to talk first about the kind of low pass and high pass filters that I have in here. Basically, usually I keep this down here around 8K, but today it's just not on really, and then the high pass filter is around 110 because there is a lot of lows, especially when we get down here at the breakdown where we have some octave guitars. Why don't we listen to the octave guitars real quick? So those are pretty beefy and they have lots of low end. So I put it up to 110, a little bit higher than I usually would. Now the top row here on the Kornef processor is the EQ. So let's just talk about a couple EQ moves here. We have a giant low mid to low shift here happening. So you can see we have plus 9.5 dB of around 200, which is a whole lot, but we balance that out by taking out around the same amount as 270. So, you know, that's probably closer to 300. Probably should be at 300. But anyways, we're basically just taking it and just shifting it down a little bit. Because, you know, these mostly end up canceling each other out. So we just shift that low mid down to the bass region a little bit more. Next up, we have 12.5K, which can kind of give you like a nasally sound in your guitar. So we've just taken a little bit of that out. That's kind of important. So let me just solo the guitars here and show you what that 12.5K one's doing. When you see this go white, it's not on. So it's just taking a little bit of that honk out, I guess. And then also up here at around 6K, we're also taking out a little bit more because there is a little bit of fizz going on around there. So it's good to take that out. Moving on, we have this little button here in the middle, which is actually quite a big deal. It's a saturator, pretty much, and it quite drastically changes the sound of the guitar. So let's listen to that. Really love that knob. It really just, like I said, saturates it and makes it sound a little bit more polished. Let's go back up here to the main riff. Next is just this little notch here, and we have it around 2K, so that just takes care of some whistles. We have that down about 6 dB. I have it a little bit more, but around 6. Next is a big one, Brainworks Refinement. So this is like Soothe for guitars, basically. So it's better just to let you hear what's going on here. I have it at minus 4 dB pretty much. Let's listen to that. So it's an interesting thing that it does, and it kind of seems like it might be a mid-side type thing, because when I uncheck it, kind of seems, even though my guitars are panned in the middle, I get a lot more of a whistle and a hiss, and that kind of takes that down for us, so that's really cool. Next, some EQ. We're just kind of shelving off more of that low end that we talked about earlier and dipping around 770 because that's where the bass lives, and we need that mid-range of the bass to come through. Next is Pro MB. Which is basically kind of taming the wub sound. You know what I'm talking about of the guitars. That nasty low mid that sometimes likes to poke its ugly head out. And that's basically just triggering whenever it senses it gets a little bit too loud, it just brings it down. Next is something interesting here. I don't know how many of you know about this, but Gullfoss is a very interesting plugin. It's basically a magic mixer that does all the work for you, kind of. Once you get a really good bass, it's cool to run it into Gullfoss and just see what it does with it. Tame basically takes away bad frequencies, Recover brings back good frequencies, and Brighten does as it suggests. So let's listen to that on and off here. I have these both about 50. I have everything at 50 really. This gets really powerful though and can be too much if you crank it all the way to 100, so just be mindful of that. Let's see, when this box goes unchecked here, it is not on. So you can tell that is bringing a ton of top end to the guitar in a way that's not too harsh. Now, this is a quite exaggerated example of this, but I felt it fit the rest of my mix. So that's why we have it up so much. You really only want this about 25, and that's usually more than enough, but we needed the guitars a little bit brighter here. So moving on, we have Joel Wanasek Bus Glue guitars. And this is mainly taking all of our palm mutes down. So whenever you hit a palm mute on the guitar, your low end jumps up and it kind of doesn't fit in the mix. So we can go to the verses and hear that. I'm pretty sure this is the verse. So you can hear whenever I don't have that engaged, whenever you palm mute, it seems to pump, which is not something we want in this because there are tons of fast kicks going on in this section and everything just starts to pump really bad and it's not pleasant to listen to. Last, to round off our guitar sound here, we have Virtual Tape Machines, which again is just another kind of saturator to really round out the sound a little bit. So you can see the settings here, and when I enable this, you'll just hear it kind of rounds everything off in the top end. So let's listen to that. So this makes it sound a lot more round, if that makes any sense. It adds some mids back into it without making it sound boxy or muddy. So that's really cool. And then the last thing I have here in the chain is a Track Spacer by Waves Factory. And this is a super awesome plugin to have on the end of your guitar chain. I don't have it on for this part of the tutorial because it makes it sound super weird out of context with the mix. Let me just show you this and show you how weird it sounds, and then I'll explain what it's doing. So you can hear it sounds super choppy, and that might be weird out of context with the mix. However, when I bring the rest of the mix back into it, this is triggering whenever the snare hits. So the snare can come through nice and clear. So let me pop that on and off, and let's see if we can hear a difference in how much the snare comes through cleanly. So you can actually tell it's the kind of lower part of the snare, that like 200 area, the body of the snare that gets to come through and isn't masked by the guitars. That's not really a necessary one, but it's a cool little mix trick. If you want to see more cool mix tricks like that and explaining the rest of all these multi-tracks here and how they were mixed, definitely check out the Patreon below. You can get access to all these multi-tracks and more. But that's it for me today. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you in the next one.